Now that we're into our fifth week of this COVID-19 pandemic, governments everywhere are starting to put their minds towards how to restart the economy once we begin to flatten the curve. The provincial government has created a so-called Jobs and Recovery Committee to examine how we do that in Ontario, and chairing that cabinet committee is Rod Phillips. He is the province's finance minister and the MPP for Ajax, and he joins us now from his office at the Frost Block just east of the Ontario Legislature. Treasurer, it's good to have you on TVO tonight. How are you doing?
Steve, it's great to be with you. So it's challenging times, but we're all getting much better at these operating digitally. So hopefully it'll go well for us in this interview.
Indeed. Just before we talk about the work of this new committee that you're chairing, I wonder if we could just get you to sort of fill us in on what's happened to the economy in Ontario since 3.5 weeks ago when you unveiled the economic statement / mini budget. How different are things today compared to then?
Well, things have gotten worse, and I think we can see that through the most recent job numbers, as well the work of the FAO in Ontario here, the Financial Accountability Officer, who outlined that we saw 400,000 plus job losses, and that was out of the March numbers. But he also looked to the number of hours lost. And of course, in the modern economy, that's as good a measure. And it was, where the job loss was 5% versus last year, the hours lost were 13%. So we are seeing, continued impacts from the global pandemic. Uniquely across Canada, we issued new revised numbers and new projections with our March statement so that they would be more in line with the reality of COVID-19. But obviously, this is something we're going to have to keep watching. And as you know, every quarter I do an update on the economic and the fiscal realities. So we'll keep providing those updates so people in Ontario know what's going on.
Can you tell whether the, I think, roughly $17 billion worth of a combination of spending, help, and tax cuts to protect people from the worst ravages of this pandemic, can you tell whether those measures are actually working yet?
In some areas, I could say we can. In the health area, where we increased spending by $3.3 billion, we can absolutely see the benefit. When you see the COVID-19 test centers pop up, when you see the expansion of the beds, particularly the ventilated beds, when you see the additional expenditures around personal protective equipment, that's all certainly working. This month we have doubled the checks that go out to our lowest income seniors, so that is getting out there. But it is going to, in terms of many of the initiatives, around deferrals of taxes, that cash flow help meant for small businesses and for individuals, we'll likely see the impacts of that, but I think that'll be somewhat delayed. The $200 checks per child under 12 and $250 for special needs children. We have had over 1 million people ask for those checks. Those will start going out. But Steve, this is something that we did our very best with that plan, but we did acknowledge it was a first step, a first phase, really focusing on healthcare and getting essential need to the people that weren't being supported by the federal government initiatives. We've aligned with them as well in terms of, they're supporting some parts of the economy. We're supporting some of the places where they can't traditionally do that. So I think this is something we're going to have to monitor on a week-by-week basis, and that's what we're doing.
What do you think you have yet to do in terms of new ideas to roll out that you think still may be needed in the days and months ahead?
We're certainly seeing gaps and responding to them as the federal government rolled out its income support programs. Again, I've commended Minister Morneau and the Prime Minister for what they've done to put money into people's pockets, but we are seeing now how that affects, for instance, the wage rates in various labor markets and what that means we may have to do. We're certainly looking to the impacts on different sectors of the economy, the small business sector in particular, and always, because it's the role of the province of Ontario, looking to the most vulnerable Ontarians in terms of the impacts on them, and I guess primarily, and maybe I should have started with this, the healthcare system. The provinces are responsible for the delivery of healthcare, and we have to make sure that that system is robust enough to support us going through this phase of the crisis. And of course, any recovery phase is going to be very dependent on our public health capacity, on our testing and tracking capacity, and on the capacity of our ICU units to support any uptick that happens as a result of what is still an unfolding health crisis.
To that end, what would stop you from, right this minute, announcing that given the problems that long-term care homes play in the whole COVID-19 spread, you're just going to introduce a new measure that would pay long-term care workers $10 an hour more starting immediately to make sure, A, that we have enough of them, and B, that people still want to do this work given how dangerous it is.
Listen, we are absolutely thankful to, not just in the long-term care sector, but our frontline workers across the healthcare system and frankly, across our economy. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that as we talk about opening up the economy. But it is an area that we've worked, I think the Prime Minister and premiers have had the conversation. We're working as we speak with them, on supporting those employees, making sure that particularly in light of the federal government programs that now offer $2,000 a month to those who aren't working, we need to make sure that supports are there to keep that workforce in place. We've also, through some work of Minister Elliott, our health minister, opened up, I believe the last number was over 15,000 people with healthcare experience to help come in to support not just long-term care, but the healthcare system in general. So staffing is one of the critical issues, and we're working on it as we speak, Steve.
Those measures all sound good. However, what about paying long-term care workers more, both to encourage them to stay and to encourage people to go into this field, which we clearly are going to need more of in the days, months, and years ahead?
Yeah, as I said, that's exactly what we're looking at. What wage rate it will be and those things. These need to be determined working with the people who actually deliver those services directly and how they get delivered. And the federal government has again shown leadership at the request of all the premiers around the support for that. But this isn't about the dollars. This is about how you get the dollars into the hands of people. And I would say that generally about all of our responses. The premier has said that this won't be about obviously we have to operate within the fiscal capacity of the province, but we will provide the funds that are needed. They need to be done in an organized way, and it's an evolving situation. As I said, those federal government support programs have changed the benchmarks, and again, they were good programs. They are good programs. They're necessary. So we have to make sure we do it in a deliberate way that meets the intention, which is to make sure there's staff in long-term care homes.
Okay, let's go on and talk about this new Jobs and Recovery Committee that the Premier has charged you with chairing. What's the mission of that committee?
Really, and the work actually started almost 4 weeks ago when he asked me to convene the economic ministers, which are just the ministers, in addition to Minister Elliott, the ministers that have economic portfolios, whether it be agriculture or mining or dealing with our hospitality and tourism sectors, but transportation. The list is long. But to say, let's stay in touch throughout this with the stakeholders that are impacted, so that when we are starting to talk about solutions to bring the economy back up, we know what's going on at the local level. So effectively, in a sentence, the job of the committee is to make sure that we can turn the economy back on in a safe fashion as quickly as we can, and make sure that that's done in a way that's sensitive to the public health needs and an evolving new reality around work that is going to be a factor until we find a vaccine for COVID-19.
Is part of your mandate making a recommendation to the Premier as to when the Ontario economy should start to reopen?
It is, and I think that is going to be a staged approach. We are already doing a great deal of work with tables that were set up by the ministers that are on the committee with me. So looking out at what are the different impacts in different areas around how and when can those sectors be re-engaged. I'll just give you one example, but there are many. The manufacturing sector in Ontario is largely a part of an integrated supply chain across North America. So the ability of that workforce to get back to work safely is going to involve making sure we have the testing in place, the tracking in place, and the social distancing and physical distancing rules in place. But it's also going to involve other facilities being open, including many outside of this country. So making ball bearings for the engine plant in Ohio isn't going to start until the engine plant in Ohio needs that support. So in that instance, we're working, and there are, in the case of our near border states, two different regional groupings, one that includes New York State, one that includes Ohio and Michigan and other states, where we're working cross-border with those governments to understand their plans so that we can integrate that reopening once it's safe to do so. So those are the kinds of, that's just one example, but that's the kind of work that's being done to make sure that we open things up in a safe way, but we also are doing it quickly because people are under significant economic duress, and we obviously want to get people back to work as soon as it's safe.
Well, let me see if I can get a better sense of when that is. I think most public health and political leaders agree that today is not the day to reopen the economy. I think they would probably also say that if we wait 12 to 18 to 24 months before a vaccine is fully in place and everybody has it, that would be too late. So somewhere in between is the sweet spot. Do you know when that is yet?
We don't. We don't. But the modeling that we released, and as the Premier mentioned, he's going to regularly release the public health information we have. But the modeling that was released today is encouraging in terms of community spread. But we are going to continue to work with our public health officials to look to when we can safely reopen sectors of the economy as well. Steve, as you know, it's a very large province, and we've seen, we're learning from what's happening in other jurisdictions where they have been effective, as it appears we have in Ontario when it comes to the intensive care, maintaining the intensive care capacity in our hospitals. But in places like Germany, where they are looking now at different regions and what that might mean in terms of what the reality in terms of both the economic and health reality might mean in different parts of the province, and how that could affect the ability to open in a staged way. So no answer today. I'm sure you didn't expect one, but very clear plans around how we will look at it from a sectoral perspective in the economy, from a regional perspective in Ontario, and how that relates to other parts of the global economy that we relate to when it comes to global supply chains.
President Donald Trump, as you know, has already indicated that he would like certain segments of his economy to reopen very much sooner than later. And he's been on Twitter sort of cheering on, I guess, the folks who are in the streets of places like Michigan and Minnesota, saying to liberate them, as if to sort of support their idea of going back to work. It's actually not his decision to open up the economy. It's the governor's decisions, as you know, but that is his position. And my question is, at some point, is the province of Ontario going to feel pressured by what's happening south of the border, just in terms of keeping up competitively, to reopen perhaps even sooner than you want to from a public health standpoint?
We won't open any sooner than is appropriate and safe. And the Premier made this clear when he was asked about reopening the borders. At one point, President Trump had suggested that was going to happen, in our mind, prematurely. This is, I guess, one of the great things about what we're getting to see in Canada is a collaborative approach that, quite frankly, is missing in the United States as far as working together, whether it's with governors in adjoining states that we have relationships with, or with other provinces and with the federal government. So I think you can expect to see a staged and coordinated approach. Obviously, there are differences in Ontario versus Quebec versus other provinces where what has had to be shut down, and there are going to be different public health realities. But we will keep health and safety right in front of every decision. But on the other hand, listen, I can sympathize with everyone out there, including President Trump, who want to see people back at work. I know from talking to my constituents in Ajax, they very much want to get back to work. And of course, we all want the economy to start to amp up again. But we have to be really clear with Ontarians, Steve, it's not going to get back to the normal we had 3 or 4 months ago for quite some time. There's going to be a new reality around how we work and how we interact with each other, how industries can make sure that people are being safe, how retail establishments can reopen, but make sure that they're putting safety to the forefront. With the LCBO, we have right now, because we own that operation, we're able to see what's working and what's not. These are all going to be hugely important components. And just something, a note of optimism. We're learning more every day, whether it's from a public health perspective, whether it's from the science perspective in terms of what we're going to be able to do around serology and immunity testing, and from a how to operate perspective. We're learning more every day and getting better every day at understanding how we can operate successfully and safely in this new environment. But we have to understand it's going to be a new environment for the time being, and be planning for that.
No, I take your point, but just parenthetically, I would say I was emailing with a mining executive over the weekend who says, look, we're in a part of Ontario which is incredibly sparsely populated. We can do our work and practice physical distancing at the same time. The local economy is incredibly challenged, with everybody basically being told to go tools down. What's wrong with letting us get back to work sooner than later? You want to answer his question?
Yeah, listen, we first of all, obviously, we want people to get back to work as soon as they can do so safely. We're coming through what we've described from the beginning as the first phase of this in terms of managing both managing the public health crisis and listen, as you talked about with long-term care, there are still very important areas that will continue to need significant focus. The fact that we've managed our ventilated beds and ICU supply, that's a credit to the health professionals and also to Ontarians for listening. And we are getting intelligence and understanding about what parts of the economy can open when, and obviously the ability of any particular industry to physically distance and to protect its workers is going to be first and foremost in that. But that is why we talk about a staged approach. We are very sympathetic to wanting to get Ontarians back to work, wanting to get the economy back on its feet. But we're going to do it when we understand how to do it safely. And there is a lot of work going on, Steve, with our public health officials, with our scientists about how and when that can be done.
Sure. Let me try one more, for instance, with you. There's a lot of restaurants that are not going to reopen, right? They're going to go under. And I'm wondering whether or not you folks on your committee have imagined a scenario whereby some restaurants where you can practice physical distancing, maybe where waiters are obliged to wear masks or that kind of thing, where you can imagine that opening up sooner than later.
Yeah, so this is exactly the work that needs to be done. How many, if a restaurant used to hold 50 patrons, can it now hold a dozen? We've seen some very innovative things. I saw out of Italy where there's actually a piece of plexiglass between the people sitting at a table. So we're going to expect the innovation from our restaurant and hospitality industry, and we're going to be very clear about the guidelines before they can reopen. But there's another critical component to reopening the economy, particularly the part you're talking about now, which is going to be public confidence. So it's one thing to reopen a restaurant. It's another thing for people to feel comfortable and confident going out to sit there with a crowd. So we have to make sure that we balance those two factors. And listen, Steve, we've been getting fantastic feedback from our hospitality sector. We know they're in a very difficult situation, but we have tried to support them through removing regulations that, for example, didn't allow them to deliver alcohol, even though they were licensed, and other things to support them. The federal government is providing support in terms of loans and dollars for their employees, but we understand that those aren't things that can be sustained in the long term. So we're looking to work with them, and what we want to. But there's two pieces: public confidence and a safe workplace, and we have to work on both of those.
Minister, I literally have 20 seconds left to ask you what clearly is not the most important question of the day, but I am curious. You're in politics. People in politics love to shake hands. Can you imagine a time going forward where that's just not going to be part of your reality anymore?
I think there are two camps, I'll say, Steve. There are people who believe that COVID-19 is going to change a lot of things that we change in the way our world operated, including politics. There's another group, maybe a little more seasoned, who say every time we go through a crisis, we always think things will change, but they go back to be the same. I think this is going to change the way business and society interacts, and we'll find ways to go forward that make sense. So, I'll look forward to that day when I can be with you in the studio, for instance, and when I can, as well, be pressing the flesh and shaking the hands of my constituents again. That will be a good day. We all look forward to it.
Amen to that. Rod Phillips, Ontario Finance Minister, thanks for coming on TVO tonight.
Thank you, Steve.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario. CPA Ontario is a regulator, an educator, a thought leader, and an advocate. We protect the public. We advance our profession. We guide our CPAs. We are CPA Ontario. And by viewers like you. Thank you.